welcome. So we're just giving all of our attendees a few more minutes to log on before I pass the proverbial mic over. Hope everyone's having a great day. A few things just to, a few reminders on Zoom etiquette for everyone. Make sure your mic is muted unless you are speaking, but the background noise obviously can affect this amazing experience, so just keep your mic off. That'll be very helpful. Also, we will be taking questions a little further on into the discussion, so just make sure you add it into the chat, and we'll make sure to get them up there for Ayana to answer for you. I also have the amazing Elle Robinson, who is one of our team members here at Soho Works, who's an amazing creative professional as well. She has a photography business, does some amazing headshots, by the way. So she's also going to help facilitate this discussion. Looking forward to that. Great, more people are on. Andrea Lake, thank you for joining us. Okay, we have Riggs on here joining as well. Thank you for joining. Again, make sure your mic is muted. Make sure your mic is muted. Ingrid, make sure your mic is muted. Thank you. Trakaris Williams, make sure your mic is muted. Trakaris, make sure your mic is muted. Thank you. All right, great. So, let's get started. I am going to introduce you to two people. The first person is Elle, who is going to show her lovely face in a minute. Hey, Elle. So Elle is a member of our Soho Works team who is also going to help facilitate the Know Your Work discussion. We're really excited to have her because she is a creative professional in her own right. She has a photography business. I know she's really excited to be a part of this talk. And then of course we will be interviewing or having with us today the queen of the hour, the queen of the Know Your Worth hour, know your self-worth, know your professional worth, all the magic. Doesn't matter if you are Black Girl Magic, let's just say BIPOC Magic, for all intents and purposes. Ayana Champagne, who is just such a talented chief HR. I mean, she's going to blow you away on this talk today. So make sure you post your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to get them to her. So Elle, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, and if you can just start the conversation and let's get it on board. Sounds good?
All right, so I'll start.
Unmute yourself.
So I'll start off with the description, right?
Yep.
Hi,
I'm muted. I don't know what happened.
Your sound has to be muted. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining Know Your Worth, hosted by our beautiful Soho Works member Ayana Champagne, who is the Chief HR Officer, aimed to help entrepreneurs, freelancers, employees, employers improve their negotiation philosophies and techniques. So whether you are well established or you're just starting out, she is the person that is going to help you, give you the tips and tricks on how to negotiate your contracts, how to demand top dollar, and how to adapt to this ever-changing landscape. So as a freelance photographer, I run my own business. I definitely know I need help on how to negotiate contracts and you just negotiating my rate in general. So this Know Your Worth talk is very important to me, and I'm so proud of it. So thank you so much, Ayana, for giving us your time and your knowledge. And yeah, we want to say hi to all of the people that are joining us today.
Okay, so am I off of mute? Can you guys hear me now? And is my sound okay? Hi, everybody. I am so happy to be here. Well, sort of. My close circle knows that this is not really real happiness. This is more like, I'm doing this because I'm stretching outside of my comfort zone. So come on into my living room, people. So in order to be in my living room, I love to see your face because I want to pour you a glass of lemonade and spike it if you like it. And if not, then you can keep your camera off. I won't force you. But if you were on my team, there's a no cameras off rule unless you're like going to the bathroom or something like that. So in this virtual world, I know we can get camera fatigue, but it's an intimate circle. So if you feel comfortable, feel free to turn your camera on. And if you feel better about turning it on and off, you're welcome to do that as well. Thank you so much, Elle, for the introduction. She was thrown into this at the last minute. You did an excellent job, so thank you so very much. But that's what we do. We are agile and we flex as we need to. So a little bit about me before we get into it, just so that you understand kind of why I'm here to talk to you about this subject. So I am, as Elle mentioned, the head of HR for a pharma company. But I have worked in the HR space for about 20 years, not to date myself, as if I have wrinkles, not to date myself, but I have been doing this for quite a while. And I would say that, you know, there are a number of different components about HR work that when people hear HR or that I do HR, they tend to think, oh, you hire and fire people. Well, yes, or I have people that work for me that do that. But I also do a lot of other things. And as Susanna and I got to know each other and I got to know more people here at Soho Works, I think that she felt that there was an intriguing moment and some information that I had that might be valuable to other people, and thought that this would be a good platform for me to share that on. So over the course of my career, I have negotiated contracts with prime ministers, with elected officials across different countries, counties, and provinces. I've helped people negotiate contracts, you know, on an individual basis, as well as people who are starting their businesses. So I think I'm pretty, you know, well-rounded in terms of the types of negotiations that I've been able to, I'll say, win, but really just kind of discuss through. And through that, I've learned a lot. But actually, I would say that the refinement of my negotiation skills really came through from shopping in China. I've probably been to 90% of the different provinces through China. And I see Dr. Dominique nodding her head because this is where we met in Shanghai, not at a shop, but let's just call it similar. But those experiences in shopping through Asia just taught me so much. And what it taught me mostly, I can kind of compartmentalize in a series of things that I would say are what you should hold tried and true no matter what type of negotiation that you're in. So what I want to do with you today is just talk about negotiating so that you are never at a point where you're feeling like you're at a loss or you're having to give up what you think that you're worth. Now, there's a lot of layers to what I'm going to tell you about, and we can spend all night talking about this because this is what I do. So this is what I love. It's part of what I do. But I want you to be interactive with me. Make sure that you're asking me questions if I'm going too fast or if there's more you want to know about something. We've got some time, so let's just get into it. So the first thing I would say is negotiation is a dirty word, right? People, they feel usually icky about it. They feel like, wait a minute, if you're negotiating with me, then I'm gonna lose out on something. And I want to erase that from your thinking. It's not a dirty word. But what I do want to tell you is that negotiations are always happening, whether or not you believe it. But if you don't believe they're always happening, then you've already kind of positioned yourself to not get really what you're worth. Okay? So let's just start there and agree that at minimum, you need to know that someone is always negotiating with you. So with that in mind, and I've got my notebook here. I hope you've got something to write a couple of these thoughts down if they are meaningful for you. I've put together what I would call my 10 crack the code commandments of negotiating. I will tell you, just based on this audience, that maybe you are familiar with a song that was called the 10 Crack Commandments, and that inspired this list. But this is about the 10 crack the code commandments around negotiating. So the first one, if you're ready for it, is to do your homework. Now, that sounds like, okay, duh, Ayana, I'm gonna Google the company or I'm gonna Google the client. I'm going to make sure that I understand kind of the conversation I'm walking into. But that's not enough. You need to do your homework to the extent that you are bringing your A game. So when you think about how do I need to prepare for this conversation, you need to prepare from your perspective, but you literally put yourself in that person's shoes. Consider what it is they want out of the conversation. Consider what it is they will be asking for, demanding, or resistant on, and position your position with that in mind. So that's number one. Be prepared for the conversation, do your homework, and be able to, if the situation allows for it, to set your expectations up front. Number two, you need to have your value proposition nailed down. Now, that is a very broad statement, but your value proposition is what is going to get people to pay you more than what they'll pay the other guy or the other woman. So let's say you're trying to negotiate for something and you want $50 for it, but they're willing to pay $40 for it. So you already know you've got the $40, right? If you say $40, okay, hired or whatever the case may be, you've got it. But in order to get what you're worth, which you have determined is $50, you need to understand and be able to articulate what that delta is and what they're going to get from you versus the other person. Now, often people will see that and they will say, okay, I'm just gonna sell me. I'm just going to talk about how long I've been doing this, or what I bring to the table from a timing return or something like that. That's not enough. You need to give me something that I value, because all this other stuff doesn't matter to me. So that goes back to number one, which is about doing your homework and understanding what is valued so that you can articulate perfectly your value proposition and why that person should be hiring you for whatever it is in order to do what it is that you're trying to service them for. Now I've got, I think, Michelle off of mute. Michelle, if you could mute for me, that would be great. Thanks. Okay. Questions before I keep going?
Don't be shy with questions, guys.
And you can put them in the chat as well. I have it open, so hopefully I'll be able to see that. Okay. So the number 3 is use a concrete number versus a range. So if you are working for someone, if you are even the employer, if you are a small business, a big business, if you are negotiating a new offer letter, you're not going to give them a range. Immediately, what if someone gives you a range? Like, you can go buy this car, it's somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. What goes into your mind? Okay, I'm gonna get as close to that $2,000 as I possibly can, right? Your number is your number. Be specific, be concise, be confident. And if you've done number 1 and number 2, then you should have no problem saying, this is what I charge. Now, we can spend some time later talking about where do you negotiate, when do you negotiate on that number in particular, but up front, you want to be very clear, having done your homework and having understood for yourself what your value is that you bring on what that number is. We're not giving ranges, okay? Number 4. This one, I struggled with putting it as number 4 because it feels so much like number 1 to me, and I feel like I call on it more than anything. But the other ones are so critical to do before you even get to this point. This is where it landed, and that is, you have to be willing to walk away. That's not cockiness. That's not being upset. That's not emotional. This is the value that you bring. This is the number that you need. This is the number that you demand. This is what you are worth because you have done all of these other things. You have to be willing to walk away. Now, if you have done 1 through 3 perfectly, then you won't end up having to walk away. You won't end up having, you might step away and then they'll pull you back. You might step away and they may call the other guy, and they will be comparing the other guy or the other woman to everything that you've just articulated in your own value proposition. And then they're calling you back. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. But you have to be willing to walk away in order to really get what you know you're worth. Number 5. This one, I would say, from the other side of the table, I hope that people do this. But if you want to be good at negotiating, you stay away from doing this. And number 5 is, don't blah, blah, blah. Speak less than you think you need to. We all talk too much. I talk too much. But when you are in a negotiating situation, be patient, be calm, remove the emotion. Say less than you think you need to. I'm not saying don't speak. I'm not saying don't get your point across. I'm just saying, if you think you need to say 10 words, say 7. If you think you need to say 7 words, say 5. Be comfortable with that empty space, because in that empty space, you are erecting confidence, you are erecting certainty, you are erecting that this is non-negotiable, this is what I'm worth. So be comfortable with those pauses. Be comfortable when those pauses become days. Let them mull over your value proposition that you've just created in their minds, the impression that you've just left on them. And look, all of this is coupled with a good personality. All of this is coupled with making them fall in love with wanting to work with you, or wanting to hire you, or wanting you for that service. Make it difficult for their heart to say no, so then their head will just follow. Okay, that's number 5. Number 6, nail down your phrases. Now, you can use the same phrases for some people, but when you do your homework, when you create your value proposition, what you're doing in that process is you're thinking about, okay, who am I talking to? What is it that they're going to say to me? What questions can I anticipate they're going to ask? And when you assess your audience, many of you probably have been in situations where you're giving presentations or something like that, and they tell you, read your audience, they're slouching in their chairs, they're yawning, they're getting bored. You adjust, you course correct, same thing. So if you're going into a conversation with a client that is, and let's say the client is a corporation, or the client is as Elle just mentioned, a client she's going to be shooting or something like that, you want to make sure that you understand your audience, so that when you have your phrases down, you're saying things that resonate with them. So I know a couple of you on here work for organizations. So I'll give you some context, and I'll give you a context in in an entrepreneurial space. So if you're being hired for an organization, what phrases are you going to use when you're talking to the HR person versus the recruiter versus the hiring manager versus the rest of the panel that are on the discussion making the decision? Very distinct, different conversations, very distinct impressions you're trying to leave upon them. When you're an entrepreneur and you're having conversations with a group of people, maybe individually, where you're trying to win a contract or you're trying to win a grant or something like that, think about who you're talking to so that you can tell them what they need to hear for their own ROI. Why is it important that your value proposition gives that person more than the other guy? And I know I keep saying than the other guy. You need to be sure that you're comfortable with being direct and connecting the dots. Don't leave that to the interpreter. No. I want to tell you what to think. I don't want you to have to figure it out, well, what was she meaning when she said, no. I'm going to tell you what you're going to get from me versus the other guy. I know who my competition is. I know what's in the market. I know what's available. And let me tell you what the difference is. So be direct. Again, all wrapped in your personality, and they're falling in love with you so that their heart is connected, their head will just follow. Number 7, listen and respond accordingly. Sounds simple, but it's difficult because you've done all this work. You have prepared. You know your elevator pitch like the back of your hand. You know it better than you know your mother's name. And then you get into the conversation and they start saying things and throwing you clues and telling you all of this that's telling you to course correct, to come a different way, and you cannot hear it. You are so blinded by your own information that you lose the opportunity because you didn't listen. So recently there was a situation I was advising on where the person had something that they wanted to get. They wanted a certain amount of money for something. And they went in very openly. I had advised them similarly to what I'm telling you now. And the recipient of that information said something kind of left field. And he came to me and he said, well, what am I supposed to say? And I said, well, did you hear what they said? It has nothing to do with all the things that you just told them. They're saying something else. So now you have to react to that. And then you can bring them back to your value proposition. So it's so important to listen and respond accordingly. You can't just go in like a Mack truck and say, I've done all this work, I'm just gonna give it to you, and here it is on a platter, and eat it up and love it, and now hire me. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that because of number 8. Number 8 is you need to make them feel like they're gaining something. No one likes to lose. And that's why negotiating is a dirty word, because people automatically think winner, loser. And what I want you to create when you're negotiating, and you're always negotiating, is a win-win situation or a gain-gain situation, right? It can be as easy as it sounds, because what you think they want may be this big, but really what they're willing to accept is this big. And if they get that, they will feel like they've gained something. But you need to make sure that they understand what that gain is. Going back to that delta between the $40 and $50, you're going to keep bringing them back to that value proposition and why it's important that they don't want to miss out working with you. Okay? Number 9. It's gonna sound a little bit opposite of what I just said, but it's not. Don't give up anything without getting something in return. Never, ever, ever give up anything without getting something in return. That something may change through the conversation. That something that you want may feel like a loss, but it's not. If you can walk away from a situation, let's say you are trying to hire someone to do something for you, it's a consulting opportunity, or you're negotiating a contract with a vendor for, I don't know, a team building event for your small organization, and they want to charge you $2,500, and you're like, no, my budget is $2,000. You go back and forth, you end up having to pay $2,500. But what did you gain in that conversation? Maybe you gained, instead of it being a one-day event, a two-day event. Maybe you gained trinkets for your team. Maybe you gained discounts for something else. Always, always make sure you're getting something for whatever it is that you're giving. Okay, number 10. This one is probably the most controversial one that I don't get into arguments with people that I talk to about this, but they're usually like, oh, what do you mean? No. So number 10 is base your price on what you deliver, not on what you think the buyer's buying capacity is. So here's an example. If I am creating a beat for Beyonce, am I going to charge her the same price as I'm going to charge Elle? Do you know who Elle is before today? No. So let's just say that Beyonce, Elle, we both love her, but you know, she's smiling under her mask. So what's important to understand in this is that we want to lead with integrity. And when we start, negotiating in the space of, well, I know you got money, so I'm going to charge you more, you extinguish your own credibility, your own confidence, and your consistency. What you want to do is base your price on the value that you bring, right? So the value that you bring needs to have this underlining understanding of the assumptions for the market, the assumptions for what it is that you're offering, the assumptions for your reputation that you're trying to build. Because you'll stand on that as you continue to grow your business, or you continue to grow your own profession within an organization. So those are my 10 crack the code commandments. I do have a bonus one for you though, if you're up for it. There's so many things that I could share with you that, depending on the situation, you flex one or more of these more often than not. But this bonus one, I feel like layers on top of each of these and even more. And even if you get caught in a situation where afterward you think, oh my gosh, they just negotiated with me and I didn't even realize it. Did I lose? If you just keep this in mind, this bonus one, I think you'll always feel like, okay, I did what I needed to do. And that is to lead with questions. It's hard. It's really, really hard, especially for me, because I love to talk. I love to give people information. I love to put it out there. I've got my elevator pitch. I've got this. Let me tell you why I'm great, yada, yada, yada. But instead, I urge you to every time something comes across your mind to say, I should say this, put it in a question form. The value in doing that makes people lead themselves to why you're better than the other guy. There is an art to forming a very good question, a powerful question, We could spend time talking about how you do that as well. But when you lead with questions, not only do you get more information, not only are you coming back to that first one of doing your homework, but you're constantly building your intel on what your market is asking for. And that's your market inside or outside of a company, inside or outside of your own company, inside or outside, public ventures. So I'm gonna pause there, realizing I like to talk a lot, and see what questions you have. Okay.
So we have a question.
I see it. Do you guys hear the echo? Because if so, I can just read it from here because we're so close. Okay. So let's see. What's the biggest mistakes you see women make when they enter a negotiation? The biggest. Thanks for that question, Gina. Oh, what's the biggest mistake? I don't know that I can name one biggest mistake because there are several. But what I will tell you is that, first of all, being a female definitely impacts the confidence that we have when we're talking about what it is we want. And that does not change based on the audience. It can be an audience of all men. It can even be an audience of all women. It does not change. We tend to think, and I know you all have heard this, like, there's a job description that or criteria that asks for these 5 things, and a man will say, I've got one of them, I'll go for it, and let me just see, how the chips fall. And a woman would say, I have 4 out of 5, so I should probably wait until I go back to school and check this other box, yada, yada, yada. That thinking falls through in a lot of different things that we do, especially in the space of negotiating. One of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten was from a Chinese man who I had negotiated some earrings from in Shanghai. He said, "You are the best American I've ever negotiated with." I was blown away. Now, I ended up walking away. I didn't get it, but to me, that was still a compliment. But what I learned in that conversation, we were standing there literally for over 45 minutes, was that I had something to prove in that moment. I had something to prove that, one, if you have any biases because I'm a woman, I'm going to erase them. I know my stuff. And often I feel like women, especially the conversations sometimes that I'm in, don't feel confident in their knowledge. And they should, because they have it. Does that answer your question, Gina? Okay, thanks. All right, what are the strategies or tactics for negotiating price increases with existing clients and contracts? I would say it's very similar to what I just went through. So first of all, I think when you're negotiating a price increase, what are your price increases based on? Again, back to your value proposition, right? And are your prices increasing with the same client or with different clients, right? Often I talk about separating the job from the individual because it convolutes what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And the individual is where you get the value. The job is just what's necessary. So if you are increasing your price because you are increasing your value proposition, it's not a negotiation. You are firm and direct and concrete in the price that you give because of your value proposition. Now, again, it is up to you to connect the dots to the client. You cannot leave it to their interpretation. You cannot leave it and assume that they're gonna say, because of A, then there's B, and oh yes, I wanna pay that increased price. You have to do that for them. You want to do that for them. Okay, next question. alter your top 10 if the audience is different. Example, negotiating with legal over settlements. Legal lawyers sometimes tend to treat clients different due to not working in legal. It's a very good question. No, I wouldn't. In fact, the order of these will change all the time. Like, you're gonna leverage these constantly depending on what situation you're in. They're in this order because of what I'm viewing as the most important thing you need to do upfront. I agree that legal people, especially in a traditional kind of corporation type setting, can tend to use legalese to make you feel like, oh, I know more than you. No, because I've done my homework. So. Now, of course, I don't have a JD and they will say, well, there is a law about yada, yada, yada. Well, yes, but where there's a law, there's a loophole. And I'm not saying go commit a murder. But what I am saying is, you know, there are situations where there's a path to get to yes. And therefore you get something without giving up something, or when you give up something, I should say. Okay, any other questions? You can turn off your mic.
Hi, Ayana.
Hi.
Oh, I hear a bit of an echo. Is that me?
You're
Can you
good.
hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Hi.
Awesome. Hi, how are you?
Oh, so good. It's good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I so enjoyed the notes that I've taken and the tips that you're giving in terms of cracking the code on negotiations. And I also appreciate the answer that you provided to Gina's question. I know for me personally, one of the things that I thought about for myself is that the biggest error I've made in negotiating in the past is not negotiating or not negotiating enough and not feeling confident in that position. So almost feeling really grateful for whatever the opportunity is and not advocating for myself. And as I've gotten older and grown in my career, I've learned obviously that that is not the route to go. And that you have to advocate for yourself, because if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else will. My question to you is, being a woman of color, being a Black woman, there's still sometimes this imposter syndrome that can set in, where I feel like, especially as I'm going and reaching for a higher position or for a promotion or moving to another organization or even pursuing like C-level positions, feeling as though, well, am I ready? Am I prepared for this opportunity? Do I have enough experience? Do I have enough education? All of these things that go through my mind when I am reaching for better, for a higher role. Mm-hmm. What guidance can you provide specifically to women or in general people of color when that imposter syndrome sets in and you feel like maybe I'm not good enough for that role?
So first of all, thank you for your comments. I couldn't agree more, especially, you know, the first things that you were talking about. Sometimes that's the biggest error we can make, is to think that there's no room for negotiation. And so I want to impart all of the things that I just went through with you guys and let you know that you're always negotiating. Even with my 2-year-old, I'm negotiating sometimes. So it's important to always make sure that you're reaching for the sky so that you don't have to look back and feel like, did I leave something on the table? Don't leave anything on the table. I'm gonna be very transparent with you with regard to this kind of trending phrase around imposter syndrome. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a few people even on this call know that I'm a victim of it as well. I think that the reason why it's a trending phrase is because we all suffer from it at some point or another. And we all, even in even in preparing for this conversation, I'm like, why would anybody want to hear from me? This stuff is like not rocket science. This stuff is not that big of a deal. This stuff is just like, duh, I'm gonna walk away if you don't give me what I want, kind of thing, you know? And speaking with a lot of the people on this call, they're just like, yeah, absolutely, you have something that's worth sharing, because the way you package it, or the way that you say it, or the way that you have validated you know, your experience is meaningful, and you offer an opportunity to people to not have to blaze the same trail you have, but to pick up on where you are. And so my answer to your question is, you know, your question being, how do you kind of get past that imposter syndrome? I would say, you know, one thing that I learned even just recently in the last few days is having your tribe of people that, you know, as you try to lean back away from it, they're like, no, you go right ahead and you can do it. That's super important. It's been important for me. I think you also need to check yourself. You need to ask yourself those questions. So when I talk about leading with questions, it's not just when you're addressing other people, it's also when you're addressing yourself. I spend a lot of time, you know, talking with people that I coach and that I mentor about the conversations they have with themselves, the language that they use with themselves. And this is in that same space. So you can sit and you can think to yourself, I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. Can I do this? Can I offer this? Can I ask for this? Or you can change your language and say, I'm ready. I can do this. I'm asking for this. Thank you for your question. Okay, we've got another one. Is there a word or phrase or action from the other party that indicates you're beginning to gain leverage in your negotiation? Really good question. And yes, there are phrases. Yes, there are actions, but it varies. And that's why it's important to listen and respond accordingly. Some of those phrases might sound like, let me think about it. That's not a no. It may sound like, so tell me more about whatever it is. It may sound like this. And you have to be comfortable with that silence, because it's not a no. Until you hear no, and I would argue that even when you hear no, you are still in a space to be able to negotiate. But you have to determine your audience and listen to what it is they're saying so that you can respond accordingly. Now, I have quite often been the wizard behind the curtain when friends of mine or people in my circle have been in negotiations. I'm willing to do that for the world. I love doing it. It makes me happy. So I often will tell people, just tell them you'll give them a call back. Then call me. I'll tell you what to say, and then call them back. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. You need to make them comfortable with those types of pauses. You need to let them know that you're in control when you're asking for something. Just go on mute for me, Tanil. And you need to
just call me out. Wait.
I can see. You need to make sure that they understand that you're comfortable with time, so that the value that you bring is understood. I hope that answers your question, Felicia. The next question: what recommendation would you give someone in corporate as an employee to request or start negotiating an existing role? Okay, so I'm going to take your question, Tiffany, as an existing role that's a higher level position, like it's a promotion, or an existing role that you're in. Promotion. Thumbs up? Yeah? Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay, an existing role that you're in. So what are you negotiating?
So let's just say, I'm just throwing out a scenario that
Yeah.
I think people might benefit from.
Sure.
So let's say you feel like you should be paid more. Like what you're doing today, you're just like, no, I feel like I'm underpaid. And you've done let's say you've done your homework.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with the tip.
Yep,
Right? So
yep, you've done all that.
Yep.
So when you've done all of that, you need to ask questions. And oftentimes people in that situation feel uncomfortable asking uncomfortable questions. But you need to displace the discomfort off of you and onto the person that you're talking to. And I would suggest that you're starting with the person you work for. So the types of questions that you can ask, and I'm going to use some language that maybe everybody doesn't understand, but I'll explain. So the types of questions you might ask are, what's my comp ratio? What is a comp ratio? A comp ratio basically says what you're getting paid versus the market. So if your comp ratio is not at the market, they're going to tell you a percentage number that is less than 100%. And then you don't have to say anything other than ask your next question, because the person you're talking to understands what they've just explained to you. Then you're going to ask, what's the market range for my position? You're going to ask things like, what's the hiring range if you were to go to market for this type of role? You're going to ask, what's the highest salary in my position? What's the lowest salary in my position? Currently employed or maybe over the last year? You need to make them understand that you've done your homework through leading with questions. To answer your question? Okay. Let's see. The next question. Yes, Gina, I agree. Silence is really, really powerful. Then there is, what are some examples of leading with questions when negotiating ownership? What's the most important thing to initially do? So I need you to elaborate a little bit for me, Trakaris. When negotiating ownership, are you trying to own a home or ownership of an asset?
Basically, it's ownership. Like, I created a product, I protected the product, and now people are inquiring, and I feel safe enough to, I'm in a position where I can leverage the product for people to buy in. And so I'm just trying to figure out, in what we just learned, how to apply that to what I have, because I don't work for anybody or for myself. Mm-hmm. But I know that all this stuff can apply to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm just trying to figure out, in that particular scenario, I know I can utilize all of this, but where do I start?
How do you apply it?
And
yeah. So let me just make sure I've got it straight. So you have a product that people want.
Yeah.
And you want to negotiate with them what they're going to pay you for it.
Yeah, so pretty much I have a product that people, based off how I've presented it, meaning the packaging and all of that, people are now coming to me asking to buy into it. It's in the beauty industry. So I'm now open to doing that because I've done all the work and I understand what I'm doing, and I understand that it's better to kind of have someone buy into this so I can also take that trademark a little further.
Yeah. So just based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you've got a little bit more homework to do.
Okay.
It sounds like you need to better understand what good looks like when an investor buys into your business, because you don't have anything to compare it to. Mm-hmm. So you got to start there. You have to package your thinking in terms of, I want to be like, or I want to be better than, and what does that look like? All of that information is available, where you can have a good understanding of the pitfalls, a good understanding of what a good deal would look like, and what the going price for your product would be, and then all of the nuances that would be associated with that.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah,
okay.
Go for it.
So in the branding process and all of this, I've already picked these pantheons in which, okay, this is who we're gonna model it like that, but make it better. And, I have my prices, but what I don't really understand is,
Patrick, you need to mute your phone.
Okay, sorry. What I'm trying to understand is the fact that, okay, I've done all of that homework, but I've been like, okay, this is mine. I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to benefit from this because this is mine. I trademarked this. So now, all of that has been done. We got price points. We have all of that, comparing it to the market. Mm-hmm. But I am a little
Risk averse.
intimidated by
Yeah.
people investing
Yeah.
because I want to make sure
Yeah.
that I get the best deal for
Right.
this great product that I've
Right.
curated.
I totally understand that. I don't know if you were on the Soho Works chat yesterday with Zach Farmby talking about his artwork, but he's my husband and he's been doing art for, since I've known him, and we've been together a lot of years. So, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, including him, went through, and I got to have a front row seat of this, or go through this balance of being on the brink of something great and not intimidated, but risk averse to wanting it to slip through their fingers, right? And that's fair. That's normal. That makes sense. But I think that you have to take risk in order to get reward. But you want that risk to be very calculated. You want it to be very precise. And so when I say do your homework and you say, I want the best deal possible, what I hear is, I don't know what the best deal looks like. And that's what you need to uncover.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So we have, we're gonna take 2 more questions before we wrap up the
Okay.
virtual discussion.
I didn't even realize it's 5 o'clock.
So just put them into the chat. I think we already have one that was already answered, so we'll just go to the next one and we can add one more. Thank you so much for attending today's talk. Keep going, Ayana.
Okay, I have friends. There are 2 schools of thought around who should put out the first number and for your thoughts. And then I have friends who have been offered severance packages. How does one go about negotiations? Some folks don't know they can. I'll try and combine these 2 for you. So throwing out the first number in negotiations, I would say it's not about who throws it out first. There's always a buyer and a seller. And the seller has the number. And so just going back to those commandments, I would say that if you have your number is your number. So you can say it at the appropriate time. So you might remember I talked about setting your expectations up front. But up front doesn't mean the first sentence. It might mean the 100th sentence. You have to determine when the right time is to bring that in. But you're going to do that once you've started to create the understanding of your value proposition. That being said, severance is a whole other ball game. There are legal implications to severance. There are things that HR professionals and legal professionals have to adhere to in order to drive consistency. And so when you get a severance package, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes before that's executed in order to create a framework that drives consistency across the people who are receiving that package. So that is usually a non-negotiable. But what is negotiable that's outside of the framework of that document is sometimes your continuation of employment, your ability to apply for another job, your opportunity to extend your leave because of a project you get assigned to before it's all said and done. That usually doesn't happen in that first conversation around the severance package. So let's say, and I don't know if I want you to tell anybody you heard this from me, but let's say you get a severance letter and your last day is on Friday, or excuse me, your last day is in 3 months because there's usually some sort of notice period or whatever. Okay, fine, this is my severance, this is what I'm gonna get so long as I, do these things, and in 3 months my job will be eliminated. In that time frame, you can get assigned to different projects, get assigned to another job. Things can change that continues your employment. Now, you can't have both. You can't have the employment and the severance package. So just understand that usually the framework of the severance, like that agreement, is a non-negotiable. Okay, so I think Susanna's telling me I'm out of time. So, but I see there are more questions coming in. So here's what I would like to offer you guys. Let me see if I can get this to work. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna adjust this. Here is what I would like to offer you. If you have additional questions and you would like to continue this conversation, here is how you can reach me. Again, I love this stuff. I love what I do. I probably painted a picture of all I do is negotiate all day, but I don't. I mean, different conversations I'm negotiating, but it varies in the space of a number of different areas. So if you just want to run your question by me, or you just want to, continue this conversation, I'd love to. So yeah, reach out, and thank you so much for joining. A special shout out again to Elle for helping me get through this, and Susanna for giving me this opportunity. I really, really appreciate Soho Works for giving me the platform to share a little bit of knowledge and some of my experience. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all and talking to you all soon again. Thank you.
Thanks for attending, everyone. Thank you, Ayana.
Thank
You are
you.
amazing as always.
Thank you.
This was so valuable on so many levels. I felt like the gems were just dropping.
Thank you
Next
so
time we
much.
need to give you like a soundtrack, like to enter. This was really good.
What I will say is that if you guys are negotiating anything right now, you really do want to call me. All right.
Thank you again, everyone, for attending. If you have not looked at the chat, I did put in the email address if you'd like to visit Soho Works. Visit, as I call the space that Ayana calls her work home, because she is here every day.
All day.
And it's 45,000 square feet, so there's a lot of space, and we're very, very on the health and safety, conscious tip over here. So if you are interested and you just want to get out of your apartments and just have a different space to work from for the day, please email me, susanna.woodley@sohoworks.com. And we also have a space in the Meatpacking District as well. So either in Brooklyn or Manhattan, we'll be more than happy to let you come in as our guest for the day.
But it's the
All
best
right.
in Brooklyn.
Yeah, come to Brooklyn, that's where it's at. All right, everybody, have a wonderful, wonderful evening, and
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.